C-Money had to step away, but of course, we got to talk about Bungie. Now, I'm going to read a report from Destiny Bulletin, and it comes the way of Jason Schreier, who writes for Bloomberg.com. It's an article that he posted. Bring up the article. I don't think I could read it because I'm not subbed to them, but I can at least read the headline. Yeah, this was posted yesterday, August 28th, 2024 at 1:02 p.m. Top director at Bungie was fired after misconduct investigation. And the subtitle is Veteran Developer Who Worked on Hit Video Game Franchises Halo and Destiny was directing the next major title, Marathon. Now, this is a potential disaster for them. And of course, shout out once again to Destiny Bulletin on X or, well, Twitter. And they have a piece of the article, which of course I'm going to read verbatim. And we're going to get into Marathon because there's an additional quote here that really does set up this game to potentially be in some big trouble. So who are we talking about? Well, Chris Barrett. Now, Chris Barrett is the former game director of Marathon, and he was fired by Bungie following an internal investigation in which at least 8 female employees raised complaints earlier this year that he had behaved inappropriately towards them. He started at Bungie Incorporated in 1999. Barrett rose through the ranks as an artist and then a director of the popular Halo and Destiny franchises and served on Bungie's board before the company was purchased by Sony Group Corp for $3.6 billion in 2022. Until last summer, he was also the director of Marathon, which the studio is hoping will become its next big game franchise. But in late March, he suddenly left the company. Behind the scenes, and again, we're going to just reading directly from the article, folks. Barrett was terminated following an internal investigation in which at least 8 female employees raised complaints earlier this year that he had behaved inappropriately toward them. According to to 8 people, including multiple women who reported Barrett, as well as other Bungie employees who were either involved in the investigation or spoke to the women involved. The people that they spoke to, of course, have asked not to be named, discussing private information. So why is this a problem for PlayStation? Well, ladies and gentlemen, the reason why it's a problem for PlayStation is because they purchased this studio for $3.6 billion. And the purchase, the ideology behind the purchase was that Bungie was going to come in and give them very, very expensive guidance to how they could ramp up production and for games as a service for PlayStation, which notoriously is a single-player, story-driven, narrative-focused, adult-themed game maker. Maybe, again, I say this all the time, to be clear, I love those games. I love the movie-like quality. I don't like the controller. I like the DualSense, but I hate the battery. I like the stories that they tell, which is why I own a PlayStation 5 and I buy all of their first-party games. Now, if they're not for you, I hear you, but they're for me. But one of the things lacking, at least for this entire generation, that's not a multi-plat, has been first-party output for multiplayer. And it's a realm that makes a lot of money for places like, well, their direct competitor, Xbox. Interestingly enough, before Jim Ryan was fired, he announced that they had 12 gas games in development from their first-party studio, which is just about all of them. Now, that was immediately cut in half, and obviously we're not going to go into what was already, canceled. We know about the Twisted Metals, we know about the Spider-Man game, the multiplayer game. We know about The Last of Us. We know all of that. But what was left was Helldivers 2, which, again, maybe it's not for you. The game is really good. And a lot of people bought it on Steam, not so much on PlayStation, which is not surprising because they don't play multiplayer games. They just don't. If it's not Fortnite, if it's not Call of Duty, it's not Apex Legends or PUBG or even Minecraft, they're just not playing. That's a fact. But why this is troubling news, ladies and gentlemen, for PlayStation is a Tom Henderson quote after this story by Jason Schreier. And look, it's a one sentence line that hits like a ton of bricks. And again, who is Tom Henderson? Tom Henderson obviously is the owner of InsiderGamingIG.com. And of course, he is prominent member of the press. Maybe you don't agree with all his stuff, and I don't agree with all his takes, but he's obviously a big time journalist. This is what he had to say, folks, and it's cringeworthy. He says, Marathon is so cooked. Not just this, but just everything I have heard. And of course, there is a story which I will include in the show notes. So if you want to click on it, you can. And look, they're in a pickle, ladies and gentlemen. And C-Money, I'm not sure whether you heard what Tom Henderson had to say. Look, it's and I'll read verbatim. Let me read verbatim and reread exactly what he said. And of course, we're going to react to the director of Marathon being fired for, of course, inappropriate behavior with 8 different females. He was fired. So, of course, I would imagine there's somebody in place now that's going to take over for him. But this is probably why Marathon is in big trouble. But look what, again, this is coming the way of Insider Gaming, and that's Tom Henderson. He says Marathon. Okay, hold on a second. Sorry, I pulled up the wrong one. Hold your horses. Let me see. Tom Henderson says Marathon is so cooked. Not just this, but just everything that I have heard. See, Money, this was supposed to be a game from the savior, Bungie, who was supposed to fly in like a superhero and save their way of making games in a gas game method. And obviously, well, who's going to save the savior? Because now Bungie is now no longer run by Bungie. It's run by PlayStation. And it's run by Herman Holtz, based on what we heard of last month with all the layoffs and all of the inner troubles. You know, again, the last Destiny 2 update and DLC was reviewed very well. It just didn't sell very well. And on top of that, you have what happened with Concord. And now you don't know what's going to happen with Fair Games. That's Jade Raymond's payday looking type of game. And now Marathon, which was delayed into 2025, it appears seems to be so being run so dysfunctionally that the game may not even make 2025. Let's talk about this because a lot of people are.
I mean, listen, well, first, when it comes to that other stuff, like the fact that this shit is still happening, like in this time. I mean, the fact that it ever happened for sure, but the fact that it's
You're talking
still
about the
happening, like
misconduct.
the misconduct,
Yeah,
yeah,
indeed.
like
Yep.
that's wild. Like again, the fact that it ever happened, obviously, it's crazy. But we had all that come out with that whole hashtag Me Too movement where everything was being exposed. Like we saw all this crazy shit that was going on, and it's like after you see that and you work at one of these companies, like how do you not just like pump the brakes completely and be like, you know what? I dodged the bullet. Nobody came out against me. Let me just stop and not do it anymore. Like, why are these people like people are sick, bro? So the fact that that dude did that and he got fired, good for him. I mean, like not good for him, like good that it happened to him getting fired. Um that's just wild. Where does that leave Marathon? I mean, shit, when before he got fired, it wasn't looking great, right? Like, it wasn't looking great. So, I mean, how much of this game was his? Like, how much of this game was, his saying or his, vision, right? We don't know. Anytime something like this happens, this is obviously, abrupt. It's not something that, you sit there and say, okay, well, let's start getting somebody else ready to go because we're going to do this. It's like, oh shit, that we just found this out. This has to happen now. So what is going to come from this game? I don't know, man. I mean, listen, in theory, before they showed us what Marathon looked like and what it was, I was actually really intrigued and I was kind of looking forward to the idea of what Marathon was. Marathon was a single player game back in the day. So I thought
Uh,
they were going to do like a,
and now it's an
go back into that
extraction
world.
shooter. Yeah.
Yeah, fucking extraction shooter. Like what? What? Like what? Look, I don't know. That just seemed. I'm so disinterested in that game. And then we heard reports that people who have played it thought it was garbage, like that it just was not good. So like at this point, we did hear a report right not too long ago that people saying that Marathon was in bad shape and that I forget who it was. Was it Jason Schreier? Jason Schreier. It wasn't a
Yeah,
report. He was
yeah, he
talking
did.
on that podcast.
He was on a podcast where he said that
Yeah.
it's not in good shape at
Not
all.
in good shape, and, like, that even, like, even the date that they delayed it to, which is not an announced date, but is for next year or whatever, even that date seems unlikely and more likely to shift, and especially you get some news like this is gonna be a whole, new wrench in the situation, and, I mean, it's just not looking good, and, you brought up the idea that Bungie was supposed to be the savior, right? I mean, and the crazy shit is that that's the way Sony positioned them, right? When purchasing them, they said that they bought them for their expertise and their knowledge of the games as a service and all this stuff, and even had the balls to come out here and say in the long run, I think Bungie is actually going to be it's a better buy than ABK. You know what I'm saying? Like they came out here and said some outrageous stuff, and for all of it just to kind of turn out the way it did, I mean, Bungie's no hero. Okay, Bungie's no hero. They're not saving anybody. If anything, they're just a complete and utter waste of money for Bungie. I'm sorry for Sony. Like it was a waste of money. They spent this money and they're not getting it back. They still might be still making payments on that crap. You know what I'm saying? Like it's not even something that it hasn't bore any fruit, right? The fact
No.
that people are playing Destiny 2 doesn't matter because they're not playing it enough, even though the numbers are good for a company with 800 plus studios after letting go of basically 500 people. Right? Like, it's not making enough money, and that's
Yeah,
what
you're
I
right.
think, like, none of this like, as much as we, you know, when like, we don't wanna, like, making money, we use that because, the ponies use that shit on us, or so, like, we use it a lot to kind of show, like, at the end of the day, no, we don't. We make a lot of money here, so Xbox is fine. Nothing is changing. They all think Xbox is gonna disappear. Obviously, it's not, right? 'Cause they make so much money. But when you talk about something like this, the money does matter because when you look at how much that studio brings in, we know that they were down for years, bro, years. And this wasn't some massive success with the final shape. It wasn't some huge, like, oh my God, breaking numbers. Everybody's going crazy for this game. No. And if they were not doing great, even when they had some of those bigger moments in the past, this was not going to help them, right? So they're just not making enough money to sustain. And we saw what PlayStation's doing with them. PlayStation has essentially gutted them. They took the
Yeah.
people that they thought were worth it and brought them inside to Sony, to PlayStation to do things. And then everybody else, they are literally looking at them all like, hey, you guys make Bungie, you're gonna keep working on that, but we're not paying you more money. You're not getting more. You're not gonna work on these big expansions because they take too long. No, no, no. You're just gonna put out these little content updates every once in a while, these small updates, and then you guys are making Marathon, and that's it. There's no backup plan for Bungie. They
Yeah.
took the game that they were working on, brought it in-house to PlayStation. They have no trust in Bungie. They have no belief in Bungie. The only reason they're allowing those 2 games to even exist is because Destiny, even though it's not making a lot or doesn't have crazy amount, it's still making, right? Like, people are still playing that game, spending money on the game. But once that dies, once that goes away, all they're gonna have is Marathon, right? And from everything we've seen and heard, that's not looking good. So they pretty much put Bungie on their own little island saying, "This is you. When those things die, you're dead." You know what I'm saying? Like, that's essentially what they did. They took away everything else. There's no other games being made over there. They're not working on anything secret, nothing. Everything else that's being worked on is now in PlayStation. It's completely removed from Bungie and everything that they have going on over there. So, I mean, it's not just us who don't believe in what Bungie's doing. It's not just us who sees all the nonsense that Bungie has done. Like, this just adds insult to injury, right? Like, think about Sony looking at this news right now. This guy had to get fired because he did the same thing that Bobby Kotick had to get fired for. You know what I'm saying? Like, you
Yeah.
understand? Like, this is like you're putting a negative light on on a company that's already in the negative, right? Everything is negative surrounding Bungie right now.